cultural sector, a topic that hasn't been looked into on the Huddle Global stage yet, and a very, very interesting panel coming on stage. And I'm just noticing this pattern that we've been talking about, inclusivity in general this afternoon, and now we have this panel where, for the first time, women are going to outnumber him. The moderator for the session is a writer, an art curator, and the founder of the Art Outreach Society. Proud to present to you Ms. Tanya Abraham. Joining her on stage as the first panelist is the Executive Director of Urban Land Institute India, Ms. Manasvini Hariharan. She has been a decade of experience as an architect across India, South Korea, France, and Switzerland. Coming on stage next, Ms. Kanchana K V, the CEO of the Network of Indian Cultural Enterprises, where she leads initiatives to promote and support the growth of India's cultural and creative industries. Joining them is the Chairperson of DASTKAR, a leading organization dedicated to promoting traditional crafts and supporting artisans in India, Ms. Laila Tyabji. Welcome, ma'am. And finally, the sole man of this panel, an eminent commercial and travel photographer, founding director of Museo Camera, Aditya Arya. Over to you.
Thank you, and welcome to a section which is probably very new as well as different from what you've been hearing all these days. I'm happy to welcome all of you. We're all in the creative field. To start with, the reason why we had this session and why Kerala Startup Mission decided to have it is because it's the up-and-coming section of the industry which is going to bring in the new, bring in an economy which is completely new in the sense that it can bring in a global position for us in the world. We have an employment of 8% at the moment of the creative industry. That's the employment that the creative industry gives India, and an income of $36 billion. It's expected that the entire global revenue in 2027 would be $480 billion. So we have some very important figures here who have come all the way from different parts of the world, and we will listen to them and see how this can be harnessed and how we can delve deep into this new sector of sorts. The Prime Minister announced about it in July earlier this year, saying it's going to be one of the pillars of the Indian economy. Let me start with Laila Tyabji. Laila is the chairman of DASTKAR, and would you like to start with your slide, Laila, so we can see what you have been doing? Can we have the slide, please? About your work and the slides that you have decided to present.
DASTKAR means person who works with their hands. Dast is hand, kar is somebody who works. And I think it's very important when we are talking this afternoon of opportunities to remind everybody that the Indian craft sector, the Indian handloom sector is actually unique in in the world. It presents an opportunity which is quite unrivaled by any other country. So while India is racing to catch up with the world in a lot of different fields, here is one where we are miles and miles ahead. DASTKAR has been working with craftspeople for the last 4 decades plus, and we work in 25 states with about 1.5 lakh different craftspeople practicing all kinds of different crafts. Is there another slide?
Can we have the next slide for Laila, please? Can the slide be changed? Laila has a couple of slides, and so do all the other speakers.
So my life is working with craftspeople all over the country, and each of these different 700 or 800 different pockets of craftspeople that we work with have a completely different and distinctive skill and range, working in everything from terracotta to gold and silver, from building temples to small little pots, and weaving saris from the ones that I'm wearing to the kind of mundu veshtis that our moderators wearing. And this represents an enormous field of activity, which is an opportunity for people in every field, whether they're designers and creative people, or whether they're management experts, or they're engineers who can facilitate and change the way in which craftspeople work to something which is more eco-friendly, more environmental, and more ergonomic. So we started in 1981, and we provide services of different kinds, from design and product development to costing, pricing, to linking them with networks for credit and finance, and we, in the end, provide marketing platforms for craftspeople in all the urban cities in India.
Thank you, Laila. I now introduce you Aditya Arya. He's the founding director of Museo Camera, which is the largest public-private partnership that we have in India.
Namaskar. Future is bright and future is female. Very evident here. I'm very proud to be here among some of the stalwarts in the cultural space. So thank you very much for inviting me. So Museo Camera was just a dream which started 5 years back. We just completed our 5th year, and idea was to tell the Haryana government that we need a cultural space in Gurgaon, which is known as city of malls, pubs and corporate offices. I said I will create a museum, and I was able to convince them to give me a land worth almost 100 crores. And I said I will run it without any interference, and we'll create a cultural hub. And today it has become a very interesting space, which is beyond a museum. So my idea is a museum is something which shows relics of the past. We connect with the present. While showing the relics of the past, I have a personal collection of more than 8,500 cameras from 1860, which became the foundation for this museum. And the activities are book releases, art and cultural events, and a huge amount of corporate activity. So museum today is not only a place which just engages, it is a kind of business. Now my business is not about making money. My business is about addressing the issue of sustainability and raising the funds to sustain a cultural space and generate enough revenues by running classes and music and back-to-back events. So much so that we were a G20 venue. We have been given additional space to create another museum. So, how a museum becomes a place to connect with. So, educational space where thousands of children visit the museum. Community engagement, a very important aspect of my museum is how I connect with the community of Gurgaon and corporates and the world of art and culture, which is what is bringing the revenue to run this place. So local businesses, this is something which I learned during pandemic. A lot of businesses were closed out, so we started a small local market outside the museum space and started giving business to people who are doing small businesses. So this is the story of the Museo Camera, and it has become an iconic cultural hub. We are the biggest public-private partnership in this country, which is based on the fact that it's not about making money, but giving something back to the society.
Thank you, Aditya. Now we have with us KV Kanchana. She is the CEO of Network of Indian Cultural Entrepreneurs.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here and as part of this very esteemed panel. The network of Indian cultural enterprises, and it's kind of a cue from what Aditya said right now, we stand in building an ecosystem for entrepreneurs who are trying to build for-profit enterprises in the cultural economy. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. How many of you know Fab India? How many of you know Jaipur Rugs? Okay. How many of you know Rangasutra? The last one. How many of you know Neemarana? Okay. I think you know all the 4 brands. Thank you. So, the whole idea why we came into being, can we just move to the next slide, please? What is the current situation, right? We've done, as a country, a lot of work in protecting and preserving our culture and heritage. Fabulous work over so many decades. And there have been some amazing organizations like what Laila ma'am has been doing for the past 4 decades in kind of working with communities who bring our indigenous cultural assets not just at the domestic but at the global level. But today we exist in an environment where the countries are coming closer, there's more connection between the national and international markets, very aware customers have access to real-time information technology on what's happening around the globe, and the appetite to consume our products is huge, okay? But some of the numbers that I have put out here actually shows the true nature of where we stand with our products, whether it's Ayurveda, whether it's yoga. There's such a huge market share, but India's share overall is so minimal. Look at this. I'm sure the tequila thing would probably drive home the point better. You know, Feni in Goa is very popular. But you know, because of the lack of policy, because of the lack of progressive markets, you cannot sell Feni outside of Goa. Okay? So you've kind of limited the scope of something that is very indigenous to this country. that has such a huge market abroad, but we're not able to do it because there is a whole ecosystem support that lacks in this country, and which is why we exist as an ecosystem builder. Okay, what needs to be done, which is what we are trying to do for the past 4 years. These are just 4 main buckets that's required to grow any kind of ecosystem in any sector, especially in entrepreneurship. There is this mindset shift that needs to happen to say, we're going to move big. In addition to preserving, protecting, we need to promote and make this sector very progressive. So that's the mindset change. We'll have to learn from some of the countries that have done an amazing job in promoting their indigenous cultural assets. For example, Thailand in the sector of food, amazing government policies, people training chefs, bringing people around, training them, upskilling them, sending them globally to take the inherent spices, food, habits, culture of Thailand across the globe. How do you enable cultural entrepreneurship? And it's fabulous that for the first time we have this platform, and of course finally policy. So these are the 4 main reasons why we think this is the right time to build this ecosystem, and that's why I think we're here first time in Kerala. So thank you so much.
We now have Manasvini Hariharan with us. She's the Executive Director of She's the Executive Director of Urban Land Institute India. So you can probably give a brief intro on what you do, because I think you'll probably be running out of time.
Sure, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me here, everyone. I'm going to take a leaf out of Kanchana's book and ask, how many people in this room are architects? You see, you got more hands than me. I am an architect who decided very early on that there was no way to make money from this industry. And as a creative person, I had to go out and see how to do that. I am today the Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute, which means that I am in charge for a global non-profit established in 1936 in the US, but very new in India, established in 2023. I was hired to kind of see how to bring the global brand to India. Just to say that if you start out doing something and then take a complete shift in career path or use your original trajectory to become something else, then that's how it works. The work that I do with the ULI is truly to see how to make better cities. And this also comes from my personal ideology of marrying together place, work and folk. I think that you need to have these 3 bubbles interact across any spectrum of any, kind of domain that we work in for there to be success. Place, of course, is the place that we all inhabit, the cities that we live in. Work, we don't need an introduction to. We're all experts of work. But something that we forget when it comes to cities is the people. Who are we designing for, right? It's the people. And how do we leverage the people creatively to build better cities is something that I personally believe in, and something that I'm getting the Urban Land Institute to do in India. And I want to talk a little bit about what that could look like. My career has been a little bit all over the place. Being in the creative sector as an architect requires you to adapt, and therefore I moved from being a Chennai girl born and brought up. I went to France to study urban planning. I then moved to Dharavi because my work is deeply rooted in impact, and I believe that if I need to learn how to make better cities, I better go down to the grassroots level and find out what the problems are. So I lived and worked in Dharavi for 2 years. My role was that of a researcher. I took all of my interactions on ground. But I had the formal training of a planner and an architect. I had the creativity to give it a language. And then I made exhibitions out of it, like the one you see on the picture here. And then took it around the world. I took it to France, I took it to Switzerland, I took it to Austria. Only to say that something
like a Dharavi can still be relatable at a European level. Being in the creative field is much like this, saying that you take one part of something that you're doing and try to see how you can relate it to other parts elsewhere. This, for example, was a project that I did where we were strategizing for the rooftop commons, saying that why do we look at land when we talk about urban land? Why do we only look at the ground level? Why don't we look beyond that? So this was a strategy that we created for Seoul's rooftops in the city center, using and leveraging the historical aspect of its city center. And I'll keep it quick here because an architect can go on forever about all the projects that they've done. But this one was a 100-year-old Hanok village that we kind of got into and said, okay, how can we use the people to storytell, to give them our expertise, run workshops, and really create identity on a village level, and then have a regeneration, a conversation marrying together all of the people who are doing good work in and around that village to really bring out the value of the village to external actors and increase the tourism in the area. All to say that an urban planner's work can range across a spectrum. With the Urban Land Institute, my work is a little bit different. As Executive Director, I'm now tasked with strategy, business development, fundraising, marketing, team management. I'm both ED and intern at the same time. But what we do is bring to the same table your real estate developer, investor, architect, planner, artist, environmental activist, lawyer, to say that only if all of these people are at the same table can we make better cities for all of us to live in.
Thank you so much. Laila, I'm going to start with you, and just to recap what we were discussing earlier, we're here at Kerala Startup Mission's Summit or Conference, and we're largely trying to see how startups can emerge in the creative field. If there's money in this, if not money, what else can be derived from it, and these things. Laila, you have been a pioneer in the field of arts and crafts in India. What kind of an economy are we talking about when we look at crafts and when we look at crafts and the arts and all of that?
Well, it's absolutely huge. The craft and handloom sector are actually the second largest sector employment in India, second only to agriculture. But in terms of contribution to the economy, it is a substantive part, but not anywhere near reflecting the number of people who are employed in it. And I think that's what DASTKAR feels, that we have this gold mine of people with these extraordinary skills, but we haven't really used them. And in fact, sadly, we always project this as a sector of poverty, backwardness, primitiveness, when actually these people, these 200 million craftspeople that we have in India, have the most unique skills, and we should start thinking of them as skilled professionals. I always take this example, which may resonate here in this very techie crowd, that actually to weave an ikat sari and to set the warp is much more complex and complicated and requires much more mathematics and skill than to do computer programming. But we treat one as an artisan belonging to another generation and an age, and we treat the other as a very skilled and desirable person in society. And I think unless we switch that round and recognize the wealth we have in India, we are really not going to be able to exploit this gold mine, and actually this bank we have of professionals with these unique skills is going to disappear before we realize them. I think that is a role that all of us should promote, and which the digital world is very well equipped to do so. And it's a fantastic tool because really in the last 10 years, for the first time, an artisan, a craftsperson can deal directly with their customer wherever they are in the world without having to go through exploitative middlemen or disinterested government departments.
Thank you, Laila. I was talking to a funder yesterday who said that they had invested in a brand called Rare Planet, and it had started with a turnover of 50,000 rupees a month, and now they're clocking 5 crores a month. So there you go. Aditya, you're next. I know museums work very differently from a for-profit or how entrepreneurs generally look at things. And I'm also in the not-for-profit field. How do you see the importance of a museum within that sphere of things?
So museums are generally created by people with deep pockets or by governments. This museum has been created with no pocket. I crowdfunded the museum. And I used to tell the government that when you talk about smart cities, we need to talk about cultural spaces. The livability index of the city is actually calculated based on what kind of cultural activity you have in the city. So I see museums play a very, very essential and important role, not to just showcase, but as I say, we are beyond a museum now. We are a cultural hub of Gurgaon, which we engage with people from all walks of life.
Thank you, Aditya. I'm going to go to Manasvini and then come to you. Manasvini, you showed us some slides and what you've been doing, and Aditya spoke about the museum, and I'm going to connect the two in respect of tourism in Kerala, because that's a income earning sector for us, and where we place museums, and for example, we are the spaces, public spaces that can be converted into art sectors or things to do with art and design and various other aspects. How can you connect that to, let's say, something like tourism, and do you see a potential for a startup in that arena?
Tanya, absolutely. I mean, long story short, yes. But I think that, if we had to dive deep into it, there's two parts of it. One is livability, which is for the residents. And when you look at global livability indexes, it's almost always connected to culture, how good your public infra is, like pedestrian, footpaths, etc. But culture plays a really important role. 53% of increased satisfaction when your cultural infrastructure is in place, as published by the OECD in 2023. So why are we not investing more in it? And that plugs into your art centers, and in fact districts, right? Can we make more experienced districts around art, culture, sports that invite people to come in and then to spend their time there, because this is what people want to do. In the place, work, folk, triad, it's the place that matters, and specifically for Kerala, I think that given the importance that the central government has on tourism right now, given how advanced Kerala already is in having a tourism infrastructure in place, for Kerala to think about investing in art districts, partnering with each of you over here to see how to come up with initiatives, to be able to offer an experience for not just the local visitor, but also an international visitor and an international investor, makes sense. Because think about this, somebody comes to the airport to Trivandrum. Say it's an investor, right? Say it's someone who's investing in a tech startup and they want to see what's there in Trivandrum. In the drive from the airport to wherever the site is, they're going through one road and that's it. But if on the way, they could make a stop to a DASTKAR, to a Museo Camera, to one of Kanchana's centers or initiatives, it enhances the value. And so 100% I think that Kerala should be investing in art, sports, culture districts.
Thank you. Kanchana, what we would like to know is, let us hear some success stories. in the field of culture and of entrepreneurs who have built themselves up, and how they have probably done it.
So I think as much as there exists a huge opportunity in this space, there is a huge lacuna in terms of how some of these entrepreneurs gain access to support systems. The best growth story in this country has been the growth of the IT sector, right? And many of the young entrepreneurs sitting here trying to build businesses in technology and allied sectors, I think is a classic example, the same that can be contextualized and a blueprint prepared for businesses in the cultural economy. Some of the names I deliberately threw out Tanya earlier was to figure out if beyond the Fab Indias and the Jaipurans of the world, if as a common man are we aware of some of these indigenous brands that are being built. What I've seen in many of these brands is, look, technology is a very integral part of many of these upcoming brands, because today all of us have access to technology, right? But what they lack is just, of course, access to capital. And mind you, in this sector, we're not looking at a VC who's going to write a check of 5 CR or 10 CR. What they need is small working capital, somewhere from 30 lakhs to $1.5 crore, that actually propels them to take their business to the next level. So of course we need access to some very flexible capital instruments. You need a lot of experts, people from the industry who could come and coach these young businesses, right? So you need mentorship. We have fabulous accelerator programs in this country, but trust me, none that's dedicated exclusively for those building cultural brands. I think that's a huge lacuna that government and private could work together and come up with it.
Can you give us the kind of turnover that one of the brands that you were talking about, as you know, what's happened over the years, and something you've nurtured in your organization?
Okay, so I'm going to start and I'll just take on the one that I just spoke about, which was Neemarana. It was actually a brand that's working in home decor. So they kind of promote Indic arts by way of paintings that you could actually have in your household. And now if you go to their website and look at it, they've also amazingly adopted technology where you could use your phone camera and look at how a particular art, a painting would look on your walls. Okay? And most of the businesses in this space, which are about 5 to 6 years young, clock somewhere around 5 to 6 CR to start off. So what you need is very patient capital. So if you try and try to duplicate the tech template here and say, am I going to get 10x and 15x returns? No, you're not going to get that. What you need is that investment. Rare Planet is one of those who have now multiple stores open at many airports in the country. The other one is Indic Inspirations, who are talking about 6 to 7 CR today. And these are all businesses that have started using India's cultural assets. So that's kind of the average, except for one big brand, which is Suka, which is about 16 CR.
Thank you. Laila, back to you. You've been in the traditional sector for a very long time. How would you see the sector marrying technology, or how do you meld the two so that something bigger and better can be achieved for a country?
Yes, I think it has been absolutely crucial and acted as an enormous catalyst, because as you were saying, our sectors don't really require huge amounts of capital or money or credit or whatever being poured on them. In fact, quite often it drowns the project if they're given too much too soon. But they need help in other ways. So, in how to use the digital space, how to plan their production systems, how to better use. Mentoring is very important, and the kind of skills that one sector has can contribute hugely to this other sector. As long as there's an understanding that it is a partnership of both. It isn't charity, it isn't one knowing everything and the other knowing nothing. They have to communicate. And I think we've had some very successful examples of that. And though the amounts of money both that the sector requires and that they manage to generate may not be these vast astronomical figures that industries achieve. I think we have to look at it as to what you put in a small project which DASTKAR started in Ranthambore, where the Tiger Park is, where they were literally at starvation level because these 17 villages had been taken out of the environment to create the Tiger Park. I'm not saying the tigers should not have a dedicated space, but people shouldn't suffer in the process. So we were asked to go and do something and provide income generation opportunities to the women. Now that particular project, that particular one of those villages that we worked with, those people are today doing a turnover of 3 or 4 crores. I've just come back from Delhi where we had, this is the paradox of India, on one hand you hear of handloom weavers committing suicide in Telangana, but here in the pollution, in our small space in Delhi, they sold 2.5 crores in 10 days. So there is money here, and the exciting thing is that the amount of investment in terms of finance is not very much, and its generative power is huge because the skills are already there. It doesn't use very much expensive infrastructure. The raw materials are usually locally available, and putting these things together and giving them the HR inputs that they need can create a catalyst which is quite extraordinary and which, as I said, is not found anywhere else in the world.
Aditya, I'm tweaking my question to you a little bit than what what we discussed earlier. I want to go back to technology again. Museums are using technology a lot today, and startups are using technology to support museums as well as generate income for themselves. So do you see that as a potential for the younger generation in this field?
Yes, absolutely. Technology is what we need, and I can tell you many of the companies who are coming to the museum to do events are using technology to project their projects, to showcase their projects, and we are constantly working with digital technology as to how to make the museum visit more immersive, and especially for the schools, children, and it's not about just seeing, it's about addressing their other senses.
Right, and what Google Arts has done, you've taken technology and they've come up with this fantastic platform where you can access arts and cultural parts of the world. And that's something we could possibly do in India, right? Because it's a plethora of things that we have here in that field. So I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, that there's a huge possibility. Coming to you, Manasvini, I want to go back again to technology because, I just feel that would probably be the interest of a lot of people here. How do you position that, especially in the public sector or the public sphere, that you're talking about art and sports and all of these things?
No, absolutely, Tanya. I think that the potential is huge. I think for tech and built environment, in my opinion, there are 3 clear pathways. One is in the planning field, wherein in India we don't even have a digital building census. If you look at this neighborhood and you want to say, okay, I want to make an art district, how many building facades can we have something on with tech, light it up the way that a cathedral in Paris does, to activate that space. We don't have that data, right? And so already with tech, from a planning perspective, to do a building census, number one, as soon as we have that, I'm confident that we will soar when it comes to making better cities. Number 2 is in public spaces. I think that AI, VR, the way that Singapore is activating some of its public spaces by using deep tech, to make that experience accessible for the passerby is going to be big. As soon as we're able to tap that and see how to make it accessible, funding will have to come into play here, but when we make that accessible, I think that it will change our public spaces. And lastly, I think, we're already doing some of it, but with IoT, Internet of Things, looking at smart city solutions, which will reduce energy consumption by 30%, according to McKinsey. Anything along the decarbonization front. Gravity Labs, based in Bangalore, takes pollution from car vehicles and converts it into ink that's then used for art. Right? Just one example of how tech can play a role in both built environment and in the art creative world. So the opportunity is big. It's time for the techies to be creative to see how we kind of bring that aspect to the creative field.
Yes. Kanchana? I know there are challenges in this field, and capital is one big aspect, when you look at the creative economy, because it's an organic economy that we have in India. How do you think both the government and the private sector can support this, and how can maybe big investors or funders also come on board? I know CSR is one, but do you have other ideas that would help support the industry?
I think there's a huge role for each stakeholder in this ecosystem to contribute. I think we're sitting here today as one of the first, even talking about this, right? People do not understand culture and business, right? We look at it in isolation. How can you kind of dip into this extensive knowledge that we built over so many decades in this country, and how do you promote it, take it forward? That's you need forums like this aim to create awareness, which government entities and other private players could do. Second, as even ma'am said, you don't need a lot of capital to start or propel this. I think that like a good PPP model that could emerge, I see a huge potential for that to put together a small fund. Which could be tied to many of the accelerator programs that individual state governments run as well as the central government runs. So that's another way that brands could access funds, get visibility, and a lot of market linkages. Private players, big corporates, for example, if I take the fashion and craft, Aditya Arya's, the Taneras, they could do amazing job in just coming and engaging with these brands and saying, hey, what does it take for you to be onboarded onto our platform? What are those product specifications? How do you sharpen your product? How do you bring technology so that you can do effective inventory management to cater to the needs of the customers? So there are a lot of these processes in building a brand that I think will only happen if all the stakeholders in the ecosystem come together, which includes the government and the private players.
Thank you. We've sort of come to the end of the session today, so I'd like to ask the audience, do you have questions or do you have clarifications in this field or comments? It doesn't matter what it is, because we are very aware that it's a new field. Okay, I don't think we have any, but I'm going to ask if you have 1 minute more. There is a question. I can't see.
Yes, there is somebody. Can we have a microphone today?
Hi, sir. So I'm Rupak, the founder of Tanya Abraham. So Tanya is a ritual art form in North Kerala. I guess you don't know, so it's Kantara of Malayalam. Right? So this was written as a hobby project, but then we realized there is a huge potential for cultural tourism in the space. We are expanding it to the whole Kerala as well. So, do you think there is good space for these kind of cultural experience tourism? And if you would come in as, if you have any suggestions, what would you like to include in this app?
Is this question specific to somebody, or anybody can answer it?
Anybody can answer.
Kanchana, would you like to, because you are dealing with experiential tourism?
I think it's a very complicated and difficult space that you're working in, so kudos to that. Yes, but I think what we have seen so far in some of these traditional art forms that are very relevant to a particular geography, going in isolation to just promote that in itself gets very difficult. So if I were you, for example, in this amazing, vibrant sector, in the space that we have been in the past 3 days, I think this is perfect to kind of bring some of these art forms for people who are not from Kerala to able to understand this. Some of the art forms you're talking, I'm pretty sure even in the adjacent states nobody is aware of. So we'll have to figure how you can come up. The best way to do this is through collaboration. There are a lot of interesting experiential tourism brands that are mushrooming in every state. If this gets added as an additional product that gives a customer a holistic view of what he gets if he visits Kerala, right? So he's going to the usual Wayanad, Munnar tour, but in addition, can he come and look at art forms that you are doing? Somebody else is probably doing something in Kalarkot, right? So how do you kind of bring all these things together? I've seen collaborations work amazingly well. Happy to make some connections offline if that would be of help.
Thank you. Any more questions? Or?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Raghav. I'm coming from Chennai, and I was interested by the point that Manasvini made about the lack of data. Any kind of high-level planning requires that you have the data to actually make that high-level plan and enforce it. For example, one of the problems that I'm facing in Chennai is that every time it rains, it just floods. And there's a lot of loss to property and a lot of, actually the people in the ground floor of my apartment can't even live there. Every year they change tenants and then, there's a lot of loss of property that happens. And obviously we need data points to convince the weight of these measures that are not taken, right? The loss of opportunity, when you don't make certain measures over a period of time, cumulatively gets a lot of economic loss. So in order to solve the problem of the lack of data points, who are the players who need to be the ones taking the initiative to solve that? And how do you persuade them? What is their incentive to actually solve this problem?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm going to wear my hat. I actually used to be advisor to the member secretary of the Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, so I'm part of the problem. But what we did do as CMDA was say that we need this data. Like everybody agrees that the data needs to be there. Exactly what you touched upon, but who takes ownership of actually starting to map that data is something that the government hasn't figured out yet, right? The consensus is that it does need to be privatized. It does need to be a private player who can invest the money into the technology that is required to do that building mapping with your drones, etc., and then sells it to the government. The government is ready to buy it, but then they don't know how to make that connection or even what the RFP should be. What should be the goal? What should be the scope, right? Like that's also another skill that they need in-house to be able to draft it, to be able to give it to a third-party person who is going to do that mapping for them. But to answer your question, I think government has to contract a private player to map the data and then they buy it. But then the government should also make that data free, easily accessible for all citizens so that work can progress. If that data is available to all of us here, the kind of solutions that we can come up for the city once that is available is huge. But cracking that first little bit is a bit difficult. I do think that by 2027 Chennai will have some kind of data available for the public to use.
Yes, Tanya, we may have to cut short the Q&A there. Because we are...
No, we're done. We're done with the questions. All right, so thank you to the panelists and thank you for being here. I also want to invite everybody for the Creative Cultural Conference in Kozhikode on the 7th of January, which is going to be held along with Kerala Startup Mission. So please come because we're delving deeper into what's possible. And we hope you could come too. Thank you.
Thank you for holding that conversation which brought in so many perspectives, and I request you to present mementos to all our panelists, starting with Ms. Laila Tyabji. Our moderator, Ms. Tanya Abraham, will be presenting a token of our appreciation to Ms. Laila Tyabji first. I Ladies